Order, please. I'd like to call the Standing Committee of Community Services to order. Good morning, everyone. My name is Keith Irving. I'm the MLA from Kings South and the chair of this committee, and just delighted that we're being joined today by quite the artistic team at the other end of the table. Our topic today is funding for community arts organizations, and we'll be receiving presentations from the Department of Communities, Culture and Heritage, as well as three arts organizations, the 1588 Barrington Building Preservation Society, the Bus Stop Theatre Co-operative, and Eyelevel Gallery. But before we get going, I would just like my colleagues at the table to introduce themselves, so perhaps we can begin with Ms. LeBlanc down here.
Good morning. I'm Susan LeBlanc, MLA for Dartmouth North.
Good morning. Lisa Roberts, the MLA for Halifax Needham.
Morning. John Lohr, the MLA for Kings North.
Morning. I'm Barbara Adams, the MLA for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Good morning. Rafa Di Costanzo, MLA for Clayton Park West. I'm the vice chair of this committee.
And I'm Ben Jessam. I represent the community of Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Good morning. Bill Horn, MLA for Waverley Fall River Beaverbank.
Good morning. I'm Margaret Miller. I want to thank you all for coming on this very important topic today, and I represent Hands East.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome. We're also joined by Gordon Hebb, our counsel, and Darlene Henry, clerk to the committee, and I could do this at the end or at the beginning, but this is Darlene's last meeting with us before she heads to retirement. So on behalf of everyone at this table and all of the committees, I want to thank... Again, I want to thank you for all of your work over the years and to assisting me and all the other chairs at the committees as we've worked through many, many meetings and terrific. Fuel logistics, washroom, and coffee are just out in the anteroom to the left. If we are interrupted by an emergency of any sort, we can exit through the Granville Street exit and proceed to Grand Parade Square by St. Paul's Church. A reminder for everyone to check your phones and make sure they're on the "we won't disturb you" mode. And again, only under the rules of the House are the media permitted to take photos during our proceedings. As well, which is relatively new, these committees are now televised, so it underscores the importance that you wait to be acknowledged by the chair so that we can get the camera on you and get your words recorded for Hansard. So I think that is all of the housekeeping items. So maybe we could just, before we start, just go across the table here of our delegation and have everybody introduced before we move to the four presentations. And maybe we'll just start on your right, my left, and go across the table for introductions.
Good morning. Craig Beaton, the Executive Director of Culture and Heritage Development Division with the Department of Communities, Culture and Heritage.
Morning. My name is Chris Shore, and I'm the Director of Programs for the Culture and Heritage Development Division of Communities, Culture and Heritage.
Good morning. My name is Justin Huston. I'm the Deputy Minister for Communities, Culture and Heritage, which also includes African Nova Scotian Affairs, Acadian Affairs, and Gaelic Affairs. I'm also the Deputy Minister for Aboriginal Affairs.
I'm Emily Davidson. I'm the President of 1588 Barrington Building Preservation Society.
I'm Sebastien Labelle. I'm the Executive Director of the Bus Stop Theatre Co-operative.
And I'm Sally Wolchyn-Raab. I'm the Artistic Director of Eyelevel Artist Run Center and Bookstore.
Terrific. Well, thank you all for joining us. And we'll be having four presentations, roughly about 5 minutes is our guidance anyway. We'll do our best here. And I believe we're going to begin with Mr. Huston from the Department of Communities, Culture and Heritage.
So thank you. Thank you for having us here. It's really a pleasure to be here representing our department and talk to you about some of the programs and investments that we're making in the arts and cultural organizations and answer any questions that you might have. I'm going to work through the deck kind of quickly, so don't hesitate to jump in if I'm not clear in any areas. So some people asked how long I've been in the department. I've been here since June. And really what struck me when I started with the department is just the depth and the scope of the work that the department does, not only in arts and culture, but in areas like community transportation, accessibility, land titles, poverty reduction grants. Our overall, department is heavily invested in communities. Our budget has grown from 2015 from $62 million to roughly $94 million in 2019. And that really reflects the scope of how many organizations and community initiatives we're investing in. You'll see here on the slide that we're really kind of divided into sort of four main divisions, as well as the offices that I spoke to earlier. And we're investing roughly 72% of our overall budget is directly into communities on culture programs that help create jobs and drive exports and help communities thrive. I think everybody has with them, we brought a copy of Culture in Action, which is a document that was produced by the Nova Scotia Leadership Council, which is composed of leaders from the arts and culture world. And they're a departmental advisory group for us. And this document will outline and kind of show for you how cultural diversity through different events, festivals, and galleries and programming fosters an understanding of how culture impacts our lives here in the province. If you have any questions of that, the follow-up, either I or my staff would be easily be able to answer questions for you. So Nova Scotia, as many of you know, is home to a broad array of organizations that support all facets of the culture sector, from the music industry, dance, visual arts, and heritage interests. These organizations are a vital part of communities and make countless culture and heritage opportunities possible for Nova Scotians. We primarily support cultural organizations through the Culture and Heritage Development Division. Craig and Chris are here from that division. However, cultural organizations can also apply for funding from other program areas. Last year, government invested roughly $28.5 million into the creative economy. Support to cultural organizations falls into three primary funding streams, which I'll talk a little bit today that should prime folks on at least what those areas are. That's operating support, project support, and support for cultural infrastructure. So, for example, an organization could apply to Communities, Culture, and Heritage, or you'll hear me say CCH, is the acronym, for an accessibility grant for accessibility-related capital projects, and they could also apply to the Cultural Innovation Fund for a project that might help address social issues or opportunities within communities to use culture as a tool for positive social change. In terms of operating investment, we provide operational support to roughly 153 not-for-profit artistic, culture, and heritage organizations across the province. These are well-established organizations with a proven track record. And as I said, they're located from Sydney to Yarmouth across the province. We're currently investing about $6.5 million annually into operating support. And as well, Arts Nova Scotia is an arm's length agency that provides funding for professional artists and organizations, which is roughly $1.3 million operating funds annually. The other funding stream is around project funding. So in addition to the operating support, we offer project support through various programs, both within the Culture and Heritage Division, where Craig and Chris lead, as well as other grant programs across the department. So organizations or individuals, they can apply to these programs, and they're a vital component of community art initiatives, and they make countless culture and heritage opportunities available for Nova Scotians province-wide. There's approximately annually about $10.5 million available for project funding. An example of the impact of this, just to highlight an example, would be 2B Theatre, which I'm sure many in the room are familiar with. It's a very dynamic theater company that was founded in 1999, and it produces and presents new theatrical work with contemporary aesthetic. They tour nationally and internationally and are critically acclaimed across the world. We understand that 2B Theatre's earned revenues have increased 10 times from what they were in 2015, in part from some of the investments that they've been able to access through the creative industry funds over the past 3 years. Another example of some of the funding which would relate to infrastructure. An example would be the infrastructure projects that we help support that create spaces for arts and productions to happen. So, for example, the Culture Link here in downtown Halifax received roughly $2.8 million from government to help redevelop the former World Convention Center into a performing arts hub for theater, dance, film, television, music, and with additional space for entrepreneurs. The Convent, which some of you may be familiar with as well, up in Sydney, it's a similar cultural hub. It received $3.2 million to transform that space into a culture hub to support community organizations, cultural organizations, and individual artists, and that's poised to open in the next few months. Staff here at our department, of course, we're always looking to leverage funds, so we work very closely with municipalities and their federal government to support these cultural infrastructure projects across the province. An example of some of the support that we provide to community cultural projects, I'll highlight first the one on the bottom, which is the McPhee Center for Creative Learning, which is a few blocks from where I live in Dartmouth. It's a nonprofit training center for youth that's doing some really amazing work, working with youth that may not be thriving in traditional classroom environments or may be at risk for dropping out of school or may just have barriers to accessing creative learning opportunities in their schools or in their communities. And this community hub really is about building confidence and inspiring creativity among youth by offering unique programs in either the visual arts, creative writing, or technology in a safe and welcoming and inspiring space. It's not just about creativity and the arts. This really is about development of self-confidence, life learning skills, appreciation of value of giving back to the community, and building those skills that can help them contribute to the community and get employed. Another example would be the top example, which is the Ross Creek Center for the Arts near Canning. This offers summer and March break camps for kids, adventure weekends, adult arts workshops, international artist residence, school and community programs, and it really is a hub and a driver in that community. It's also home to the award-winning Two Planks and a Passion Theatre Company. In 2018, it received from our department $300,000 in investment in capital improvements, along with support from ACOA to kind of bring it up to the next level. I know we're short for time, so I'm going to wrap things up now just to highlight a few of those examples. I want to thank you for the opportunity to come and talk about things, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions, so I'll stop for now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Huston. We'll now proceed with Ms. Davidson.
Great. Oh.
Okay, so my name's Emily Davidson, and I'll be presenting about the Turret Art Space. So you might have noticed that our organization name, 1588 Barrington Building Preservation Society, is pretty long, a little unwieldy. So we'll be talking about the future of our project, and the project is actually going to be called the Turret Art Space. So it's going to be a new multi-purpose art space that's in the historic Khyber building on Barrington Street. This building has a really unique history. It was the home of the Turret, which was one of the first gay social spaces in Halifax in the 70s. Later, it was the home of the Khyber, the Center for the Khyber, which is an artist-run center. They're still alive and kicking. They're on Hollis Street right now. But the building has been shuttered since 2014. And due to community advocacy, which I've been a part of since then, our organization is now the proud owner of this building. We purchased it from the city for $1. Great deal. And we've been the stewards of this building since 2018. And we're, right now, the phase of our project is basically a quiet campaign. We're going out and looking for donors who can help us get to our capital funding goals to redevelop this building. So just want to talk a little bit about what the redevelopment will have. It'll have spaces for 8 nonprofit offices looking to focus on the arts and LGBT community for those spaces. There'll be a gallery, there'll be a rehearsal and presentation space. That's going to be a flexible space that's rentable by all kinds of different community groups. There'll be a bookable boardroom, and then there'll be 2 commercial lease spaces. And one of the important things about our model is that the commercial leasing actually helps to offset nonprofit rates. So we have a combination, and that's going to allow this project to be sustainable. So this project is our way of addressing what we see as a critical need for art space in Halifax. You'll see on the slide closures of spaces over the last 15 years. So Bloomfield Center had artist spaces and administrative offices. Above Propeller, there were artist studios. The Roy Building had office spaces for many arts organizations. The Kyrre Building, you'll see up there, though happily we own that space again. CBC Radio Building, Manual Training Building, that was in the North End, had artist studios. The Living Room, which is a theater space. 6050 Almond Street had a combination. There were music spaces, production studios, artist spaces. The Waiting Room was another small theater presentation space. And I've actually listed this one in the wrong space. So Cornwallis Street is now closed after the hurricane. So when I made this slide, that's an error. And so the only one that's on this list that actually is still the uncertain future is where the Kyrre, the Artist Rent Center, is now, and that's renting from NASCAD at the Fountain campus, which, as you may know, is being considered for redevelopment. So I want to talk today about what it means to support emerging artists. So I thought I would start with just a quick definition of what an emerging artist is. So an emerging artist is someone who's just entering the professional field of practice. So that is often young people, but it is also can be older people, people who are in a career change. And often what we see is that it's artists from marginalized communities who haven't gotten a chance to break into the mainstream art scene. So they need spaces that nurture and welcome people at a low barrier to be able to kind of enter the professional world of the arts. So I just want to talk about some of the benefits that all Nova Scotians receive when we support emerging artists. So we'll get the creation of experimental and innovative art forms across disciplines. And we see in emerging artworks a lot of really interesting cross-disciplinary practices. So things that use dance and theater together, visual art that also uses film, and all of these very interesting cross-pollinations. And I think that's something that we really bring forward in our project because we're going to have different arts groups from many different fields. Emerging artists feed the broader art scene. It's how we develop a new generation. Emerging artist productions also offer a low barrier way for the public to engage with art. Often emerging artists are doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things. They happen in communities. They happen through networks of people that might not be as familiar with the arts. And so it's a way to not only introduce artists to the professional community, but also introduce new audience members to art appreciation. And it's also an opportunity to develop cultural education opportunities for artists and audiences. So this is something that I wanted to share with you, is that supporting emerging artists in Halifax actually supports artists across Nova Scotia. So I've made a little map, and this is just based on the network of peers and colleagues to board members of the 1588 Barrington Building Preservation Society. So this is by no means a thorough take, but I just thought that it was really interesting that personally we know artists who were involved in artist-run culture between 2008 and 2012 who now are making art in rural communities. So you can see on the map, we've got people in Cape Breton, in the South Shore, in the North Shore. So I think that this is something that often the narrative that we tell ourselves is that when people graduate from NASCAD, they move right to Toronto. And actually what we're seeing is that people stick around, they want to stick around Halifax, cut their teeth at places like the Turret Art Space, and then move to rural Nova Scotia, stay in Halifax, and really be part of these smaller and generative art scenes. So another thing that I want to talk about is the dire need for accessible spaces in order for the arts to thrive. So we need to make the arts welcoming to all Nova Scotians, and that means that we need a really broad view of accessibility. So at the Turret Art Space, when we think about accessibility, we're thinking about financial accessibility. So we want to make sure that the Turret Art Space can rent long-term at lower than market rates to nonprofits so that that can sustain those organizations that are reaching out into the community. And our operating model offsets those with the commercial tenants. So that's a way that we're kind of ensuring affordable space. We're thinking about physical accessibility. We want everybody to be able to come to the arts presentations that are happening in this building. And so that means having an elevator, it means having barrier-free washrooms, it means having other accessibility features that fit the community's needs. And we're also thinking about cultural accessibility. We want to nurture programming that's by and for artists from marginalized communities and really make this space speak to members from all walks of life. And another way is thinking about having things in our built infrastructure that are welcoming. So let's say we have gender-neutral washrooms, and that's a way to increase the accessibility for trans people. So thinking of summing this up, what are some things that government can do to support emerging artists? We want to see funding for infrastructure projects. We've heard that there is funding for infrastructure projects, and I think that we just want to kind of keep that going and not think, okay, we checked that off, we funded one project, we're done, see it in 20 years. What we need is to think about the broad scope and fund projects that fit for artists from emerging all the way to professional. We want to increase the funding that is available around physical accessibility. One of the things that I noticed in the package that was sent out was that funding for accessibility for businesses is actually double what it is for nonprofits, and I think maybe it should be the other way around. And probably an increase to both, because when I look at the building plans that will involve putting an elevator into this historic building, it's quite expensive. And the current levels of funding for accessibility don't really match up with the costs associated with making those types of renovations. We want to see an increase in operating funding for arts nonprofit organizations. That will really help these organizations thrive and stay afloat. And the other thing is to introduce recurring funding for emerging culture grants. There's a really great program called the One-Time Emerging Culture Grant. We don't want to see things happen one time. We want to see them introduced and then supported over time. So those are some of the ideas that I wanted to bring forward about how the province can support emerging artists. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Davidson. We'll now move on to Mr. Labelle from the Bus Stop Theatre Cooperative.
Thank you so much. Here we go.
Oh,
I don't have slides,
Okay.
but you can follow my presentation just by following my notes with the letterhead for the Bus Stop Theatre Co-op. Thank you so much for having us this morning. The Bus Stop Theatre is what's called a black box theatre. And so unlike a proscenium theatre, which you'll find at Neptune, for example, which has a large framed stage with fixed seating in front of it, a black box theatre essentially is a dark room painted black with reconfigurable chairs and stage arrangements for any purpose. And the Bus Stop Theatre is also a small, intimate venue, typically seats 75 people, in comparison, for example, to Neptune's main stage, which seats 500 people. The Bus Stop Theatre has been in operation for 17 years, and over that time has become one of the most exciting cultural venues in Nova Scotia, where people go to see works of art by performing artists across discipline. That's theatre, contemporary dance, music, film, stand-up comedy, improv, magic shows, you name it, it happens at the Bus Stop Theatre. And we've been successful over that period of time by always remaining true to our mandate, which is to provide affordable and accessible space to a wide range of both emerging and professional artists. Bus Stop is host to shows put on by the Dalhousie Theatre Society and also the Start Fest for emerging artists. It's also a critical stepping stone for emerging theatre companies like Matchstick Theatre, who after producing 5 shows at the Bus Stop, produced their first show at Neptune last year. And it's also a critical space for creation and development by some of our most established and celebrated theatre companies, artistic companies. For example, 2B Theatre, which was mentioned earlier, which continue to develop and create shows at the Bus Stop Theatre, often premiering them in Halifax at the Bus Stop Theatre before taking their shows on tour globally, showcasing Nova Scotian talent across the world. And the Bus Stop also is home to numerous local festivals who count the Bus Stop among their networks of venues for festivals like the Halifax Fringe Festival, the Halifax Pop Explosion, Prismatic Arts Festival, In the Dead of Winter, Obey Convention, Now Every Seeker, you name it. Most local festivals use the Bus Stop as one of their venues. It should also be noted, Mr. Huston mentioned the Leadership Council earlier, that the Nova Scotia Leadership Council also awarded its very first inaugural Community Impact Award to the Bus Stop Theatre this last year, in recognition of the impact that we have in communities in Nova Scotia. And the Bus Stop really plays a critical role in the economic development of Nova Scotia's cultural centre, and our own mandate is very much aligned with the province's Culture Action Plan. And due to our mandate, our geographic proximity to diverse populations and community organizations in North End Halifax, and also because of our explicit effort towards relationship building, we're regularly host to cultural and community events presented by the Mi'kmaq, African Nova Scotian, 2S LGBTQ, disability, and Francophone communities, coming regularly and crossing paths at the Bus Stop Theatre. Bus Stop regularly attracts a lot of youth, often provides learning and development opportunities for post-secondary students and recent graduates in arts-related sectors. And we're one of the very few all-ages venues in Halifax, and that plays a critical role in exposing youth to art at a young age, and also allows artists to reach young audiences. Often, especially musicians, the only alternative is performing in licensed bars where youth cannot attend. And so the Bus Stop also provides space to a myriad of community organizations and plays a really important role in supporting marginalized and underserved communities by being host to cultural programs that are operated by community organizations like In My Own Voice, Stepping Stone, and the YMCA immigrant programs. And so this also demonstrates an alignment with the aims of the province's Building Vibrant Communities program. And so because of all this, the Bus Stop serves as a creative incubator and a hub for cross-discipline and also cross-community partnerships and innovation. And we play a really important role in supporting large segments of the cultural sector by answering a common need that crosses through disciplines, communities, and interests, and that's affordable and accessible space. Next in my presentation, you'll see the subtitle, Small Independent Performance Venues in Halifax, Rest in Peace. And so much like Emily has presented before, I'm showing a list, in this case focusing on performance-based venues that have either disappeared due to redevelopment or repurposing of buildings or are threatened by the same fate. And that includes the Crib, the North Street Church, the Turret, Plutonium Playhouse, the Living Room, Campfire, the Waiting Room, the Halifax Pavilion, Radstorm, and ourselves, the Bus Stop Theatre. In 2018, the owner of 2203 Gottingen Street, where the bus stop is located, announced their intention to sell the property. And because a sale of the property in a rapidly developing North End, Halifax would almost certainly lead to the closure of the theatre and the loss of a vital piece of cultural infrastructure, we've decided to launch a campaign. I should mention also To Be Theatre, which was mentioned also in Mr. Huston's presentation. As I mentioned, To Be Theatre makes heavy use of the bus stop theatre. No bus stop theatre, probably no more To Be Theatre in Nova Scotia. Either they're changing career or they're changing city. And all this investment that was poured in an artistic community that celebrates Nova Scotian talent across the world would be lost in the absence of space to actually create and develop the work that they do. And so our co-operative, which currently manages the theatre, we've undertaken a campaign to purchase the property and secure a future for the theatre. So far, it was recently announced, you may have heard in the media, that HRM has committed $250,000 towards our campaign, and our cooperative on our own have raised another $145,000. And we're now waiting to hear back from the province and also Canadian Heritage for support from those two levels of government as well. And it's really critically important that we support the bus stop theatre as well as others, because as it is, there's insufficient supply of space. In 2019, we, the bus stop, have hosted 150 different events. That's compared to 98 events in 2018. That's a 50% increase in a single year. This also translates to 275 days booked at the bus stop theatre over the year, or 3 out of 4 days booked. In the same time period, we've declined 226 days worth of bookings due to lack of availability. Of course, that statistic doesn't represent folks who didn't bother asking, knowing that we're not available. And so we ask that members of the Assembly and of this committee please support the Bus Stop Theatre Cooperative and help prevent the closure of yet another cultural venue, and please invest in a desperately under-resourced and diminishing network of smaller art spaces that's necessary for the flourishing of the cultural sector. I wanted to mention two things before I close, just touching on Mr. Huston's presentation, talking about the increase of the budget in recent years for CCH from $62 million to $94 million. During that same time period, there's been a freeze in operating funds to arts organizations. So while there's been an increase in the overall department budget, none of that money has been going towards operating funds for arts organizations and cultural groups such as the bus stop. There's also talk of infrastructure investments. Much of that is geared towards infrastructure improvements, but in the case where you don't own a space or that your space has disappeared, improvement funding cannot help you. And so with that, I'll pass it over to the next person. There's more in the package that I've handed over to you, additional information, but in terms of my presentation, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Labelle. And our final presenter this morning, Sally Wolchyn-Raab. Did I get that correct? You did. No, thank you. The mic is yours.
Great. Thank you. So my name is Sally Wolchyn-Raab, and I am the Artistic Director of Eyelevel. And let's see. There we go. So Eyelevel is what's called an artist-run center. We are a small artist-driven gallery space, and we'll get into that a little bit later, founded in 1972. And artist-run centers in particular are something that I want to share with you for those of you that are unfamiliar about their history. They're almost a type of visual arts organization that's unique to Canada, and that's because in the late 60s, early 70s, artists were gathering together to say, we don't have the right kind of presentation venues for ourselves. University galleries and museums are only showing large-scale artists. Commercial galleries don't want non-commercial work. So there was this really impressive breadth of organizations that were popping up in that time period in Canada, all across the country. And because Canada Council recognized that this was an exciting way of happening in visual arts, they created generous funding opportunities for these organizations. And because of that history and that history of funding, artist-run centers continue to thrive throughout the country. Eyelevel is very much a part of that history. We are one of the oldest artist-run centers in Atlantic Canada, and continue to exist through the support of operating funding from Canada Council, the province, and the HRM. As you can see through our history, a couple of really exciting arts organizations have come out of our history and our programs. Live Art, the Center for Art Tapes, and the Association of Artist-Run Centers in the Atlantic, which is an advocacy organization. So who is Eyelevel currently? We have what I would say is a pretty impressive reach considering the size of our organization. We have about 45,000 attendees to our events and exhibitions, and that is largely because we have a mandate of taking Nova Scotian works and Nova Scotian artists and bringing them outside to kind of large-scale events like the New York Art Book Fair and exhibitions happening across the country. We have a pretty decent social media following, and we are fortunate enough to support 100 or more artists every year through our programming, which includes our exhibitions and our bookstore. As you can see, a small but dedicated membership, smaller but more dedicated volunteers, and it eventually filters down to a single staff person who is me. So how we operate, Eyelevel really does believe in being a democratic kind of organization, and this is something that's also intrinsic to artist-run centers. And what I do want to mention too is that while I'm talking about Eyelevel as an organization, our story is not a unique one. So this is like the kinds of problems that we're facing and the way that we run and think of ourselves is something that can be applied to many artist-run centers and also many small similar arts organizations. So what it means to be kind of a democratic organization for Eyelevel is that our programming and our artistic vision isn't the taste or the artistic goals of just one person. It's a collaborative effort that creates programming and creates a vision for the organization that's dynamic and that's responsive to our community. In terms of our revenues or in terms of our budget, we do all of this on about $150,000 a year. The vast majority of that is coming from government funding, 17% of which comes from the province. And that is in the form of an operating grant and project grants through Arts Nova Scotia. Our earned revenues, as you will notice, are very low. And this is because we don't charge admission. And we very, very rarely will charge any kind of fee for attendance or participation in any of our events. And that's all with the goal of being as accessible as possible. So in 2014, Eyelevel decided to get rid of its gallery space. And this is a bittersweet moment in Eyelevel's history, in Eyelevel's recent history. We cited that the cost of maintaining a formal gallery space in the north end of Halifax was becoming untenable. And so after a lot of careful consideration, consulting with our board, consulting with our membership, we decided that we wanted to focus on providing services for our community through the mounting of a bookstore and through providing studio space and residencies rather than a formal gallery. It's made us more adaptable, but it has been a creative solution to a very real problem. But our primary challenges that I want to talk about with you now are space and time. So space meaning the availability of permanent accessible space, as well as the availability of temporary space, which we do use when we have major projects. And time, which is people power. That is a very tight resource for our organization. So in terms of space, we have relocated 3 times in the past 4 years. We recently relocated to a space in Gottingen Street, which we had a grand opening for in November. We share it with Radstorm, which is a fabulous community arts and music organization. It's a fun space, it's got a lot of character, but it has a lot of problems too. First and foremost, it's not even remotely wheelchair accessible. It's hard to spot from the street, you've got to climb a flight of stairs to get up to it. We wound up moving into the space because we got essentially rent-evicted from our previous location at 5663 Cornwallis, along with AFCOOP, the Atlantic Filmmakers Co-operative, and both of us were in a mad dash to find an affordable, available space as quickly as possible. And we were fortunate that Radstorm had kind of kept us in, or Radstorm had extended an invitation to move in with them. I also wanted to talk about space in terms of creating safer space. The ideas of diversity and accessibility are really a transversal topic in the Cultural Action Plan, and it's a transversal topic at Eyelevel as well. So when we're talking about how do we imagine our space, what kinds of services do we provide through it, we want to think about the people that we're serving, and also, most importantly too, who are we not able to serve? Who's not feeling comfortable coming into our space, who's not able to get through our front door. And something that I have referenced here is a project that happened last year, which was called Imagining an Indigenous-Led Artist-Run Center. And the result of this project was that they basically came up with a set of requests of existing artist-run centers, of things that they wanted to see that would support more Indigenous artists and more Indigenous audience members. Some of them are basic but interesting requests, like childcare, safer spaces workshops happening on a regular basis for board staff and for the public, mentorship, and also what we were pleased to see and excited to see was that more of an emphasis on providing support services rather than exhibition space, which is what Eyelevel is doing. So when it comes to time, Eyelevel, as it stands right now, takes about 5,000 hours a year of people power in order to run it. And that's about a 50-50 split between those who are paid and those who are giving of their time generously. Burnout is a massive issue, burnout of the artistic director and also burnout of our volunteers, specifically those on our board of directors. We've worked really hard to make our programming, to kind of shrink our programming down to a manageable size, and right now we are about at the minimum amount we can do and still kind of serve our community. We have known for a number of years that Eyelevel needs to be a two-staff organization, that one staff just really doesn't cut it, and it has been a single-staff organization as far back in Eyelevel's history as I can uncover. And the reason that the difficulties that we face by having a single-staff person is burnout, of course, but also it's difficult to retain kind of institutional knowledge when someone leaves. All of the nuances and all the details about how they do their job are lost. It's very difficult to document that when you don't have another person working alongside them who's kind of carrying on the torch. It also makes it very difficult for Eyelevel to hire a person of color or an Indigenous person for the artistic director's position. We don't have an opportunity to mentor artists of color or administrators of color or people from the BIPOC community. In order to kind of prep them, people who come into this position have to already have a set amount of experience, and usually that experience is gained through volunteering or through working for larger organizations. And ultimately, too, it's unfortunate that many of our directors have quit when they've started families, because it's not the kind of job that you can have and also have a family, and it's not the kind of job that you can do if you're not fully able-bodied. It's a demanding role. So I wanted to highlight that while we have a mandate to create full-time positions that, many arts organizations like Eyelevel want to see people of color in our full-time positions. It's difficult because these positions don't support a balanced life and kind of necessitate that that person has privilege to begin with. I also wanted to highlight that volunteering is a privilege, and I don't mean that you are privileged or that you receive the privilege of volunteering for Eyelevel. I mean that in order to give of your time and your knowledge for free, you already have to be in a position of privilege to begin with, and that's the case for many of our board members. So what can be done? The biggest thing is that our concerns are financial. More robust provincial and municipal funding through operating funds would be really the biggest thing that would support our organization. And then there are some other non-funding related things, such as support of multi-tenant spaces that are actually artist-driven. And so an example is the turret space, where arts organizations and the artists themselves are driving the development of that facility. And also, less onerous granting processes could be a really big support for Eyelevel. We do struggle to meet administrative deadlines given the amount of work that has to be done for our organization. I would love to see a 3-year granting cycle rather than an annual operating grant at Arts Nova Scotia, which is a thing that many other art funders do. Cool. And that's my presentation. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. Wolchyn-Raab. So with that, we'll now open up to the floor for questions, and just a reminder that we try to keep our preambles as short as possible so we can get as many questions in as possible. And we will certainly through the first round have one question followed by a supplementary if needed. And let's go, I guess, to maybe 12:50 or so, I think. So we'll begin with Ms. LeBlanc.
Well, thank you, and thank you to everyone for your presentations. Makes me excited, makes me furious, makes me all kinds of things all at the same time. I wanted to talk. I mean, I identify with a lot of things that have been said, and both from both the department and the artist organizations. As somebody who worked in a artist-run organization for 18 years. And is now free of some of the things you've talked about. But, one day we'll probably go back there. So I want it to be better when I return. But I want to talk first about the ecosystem of art spaces, because I think that, the shiny buildings are amazing. The convent, I've been up to the convent in one of its early stages of renovation, and is truly impressive and inspiring and exciting, and I cannot wait to go to the opening. I hope I get an invitation. And then also, the Cultural Link is really exciting. The Art Gallery is going to be amazing, and all of those shiny buildings are so important to the ecosystem of arts of the arts culture in Nova Scotia. But then, of course, we also know that we can't have those buildings, and we can't have stuff to fill those buildings unless we have the Kybers and the bus stops and the eye levels, because that is where, as we've heard, artists are cutting their teeth. That is where people, even if they're not emerging artists, artists are able to experiment as established artists, experimenting and pushing boundaries and pushing the art forms which make our arts and culture sector so important in Nova Scotia. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. So this is mostly to the arts organizations that are here. Can you talk a little bit more about that idea of where small spaces, which are not necessarily for emerging artists, but small spaces for emerging and established artists, and medium spaces as well, how they their value in this larger ecosystem of art spaces, and can you talk about the availability of art spaces for alternative or underrepresented voices? We've heard a little bit about that, but if you want to talk about it in the context of the larger, infrastructure discussion.
Who would like to attempt to respond to that? Ms. Davidson?
So I think to speak to your ecosystem question.
Ms. Davidson. Okay, we're now over to that mic.
Now we're here?
We'll try
Okay.
that one. There
Great,
we go.
thank you. So I think that in order to have a vibrant fabric of an arts community, you need spaces that bring people in when they're in the start of their career. And I think that those are also the same spaces that people return to when they want to take a new or more experimental path. So I think that the fact that these spaces run by artists, small and medium spaces, are affordable, approachable, and are doing active outreach, really create an entry point for artists to work on that level as a building block, and then move on to some of the other more established art spaces. I think something that maybe committee members don't know is that a lot of being an artist is about writing applications. So when you're beginning your professional career, you need spaces to apply to where the application process and the sign-up process has a lower barrier, so that you can get the hang of it, and then years down the road, you're working with somebody and they say, oh yeah, didn't you do that thing at the Khyber back in the day? Oh, okay. And then you can start to flow into the arts community more broadly. So I've seen this in action as a working artist myself. So I know that it works. And I think to the question of marginalized artists, I see that artist-run centers have really taken it upon themselves to figure out how can we be accessible to people from all walks of life? Like how can we as organizations who have primarily white people on their boards think about having an arts community that doesn't look like that anymore? And so I see people in these emergent spaces asking the difficult questions, doing the work, and really figuring out how to transform themselves so that the artists being represented become queer artists, artists of color, Indigenous artists. And I see that happening at the Khyber, the Artist-Run Center. In the last 4 years, they have transformed their programming. And so it has a different feeling. And I really see that as like a response to trying to make a better world. You know?
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Anyone else wish? Mr. Labelle.
Yeah, I'll add a couple things. One, I applaud the investments and the infrastructure projects that have been announced, and I think it's great, and it's seeing the government going in the right direction to a certain extent. But there's really a need to not forget about the smaller projects, the smaller pieces of infrastructure. And investments in large infrastructure projects, they usually have a very large cost. Mr. Huston mentioned the contributions towards the Culture Link and the convent, and a contribution to any of our organizations is really a fraction of that. And it's widespread across different areas, different neighborhoods, and different communities rather than in a single location. Also, in a large infrastructure project, in terms of art creation and presentation, there's often a commercial pressure because of the financial costs of running and presenting in large venues like that. But presentation and creation in small spaces allows for greater artistic exploration, avant-garde risk, and development in the cultural scene that challenges and allows change and growth in mainstream culture. And there's less opportunity for that in larger infrastructure spaces. In terms of availability, Ms. LeBlanc mentioned, asked about availability, and I mentioned at the bus stop, and of course I'm more familiar in terms of the performance arts sector, but I mentioned, we're booked 275 days a year, and we've turned away 226 days worth. And that's just in the last year, and that's following the closure of two performance arts spaces, the living room, the waiting room in 2018. And the slow, gradual disappearance of small pieces of infrastructure in HRM has caused kind of a slow burn crisis over the last decade, and now there's a real sense of panic. And when we came out to the public saying we're on the chopping block too, people in the theater community were literally like jaws were dropping. It's like, well, if you go, where do we go? There's no space, and if there's no space, people give up or they leave. There's nowhere else to go, and so it's a real problem in HRM, and I think in Nova Scotia more broadly, but certainly in HRM, given that we're the largest urban center east of Montreal and north of Boston, and kind of a cultural flagship for the province, where a lot of artists develop their craft and create here. We really need to invest in the emerging scene and the growth of new generations of artists. On that note, there's been investments in the Fountain School of Performing Arts, the development at Dalhousie University of new infrastructure there, which signals a growth in training and development for new students to be trained into the arts. But where are they going to go after they graduate, where there's no space for them to cut their teeth, to build a career, to build audiences? they're not going to stay in Nova Scotia once they graduate if there's nowhere for them to have a career here. And so we really need to invest beyond the schools and beyond the big infrastructure. We need those small spaces and those stepping stones along the way.
Anyone else wish to add to the conversation?
Yeah.
Ms. Wolchyn-Raab.
Thank you. I could also add, just to kind of build off of Sebastian's point about the importance of building community, and I think that small art spaces have a role to play, not just in being stepping stones to larger venues, but also as hubs of actual living, breathing community in these spaces. When a new artist moves to Halifax, they don't go and try and schedule a meeting with the curator of the AJNS. They try and sit down with me, and that's because they want to connect with an arts organization that is going to provide them real resources, but also help them to build friendships and welcome them. And that's really what, in a lot of ways, community is about. And that's why instructors at NASCAD are bringing their student groups in to meet Eyelevel and to meet with the other artist-run centers in town, is because when you graduate, if you stay in Halifax, small arts organizations are going to be your family, essentially. And I think that's, without those kinds of organizations, if you don't have an actual real community around you, you will leave.
Thank you. Ms. LeBlanc, do you have a supplementary? And I am conscious when we have one question and 3 responses, and the committee's okay with that. It just means we may not get to everyone at the table in terms of a question, but now to Ms. LeBlanc with a supplementary.
Mr. Chair, in an unprecedented move of generosity, I will give up my supplementary question. I'm good.
We're floored. Ms. Miller.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't expecting that so soon. Swallow my tea. Anyway, I just want to thank you for coming in. I can't even say I can't tell you how much I support your industry. I was also a ceramicist in my former creative youth, I shouldn't say youth, but anyway, my former life. And after that, I did fabric art when I became allergic to dust, which, ceramics is a big part of that. So it's always been a big part of my life in creating, and there's no better sense of self-satisfaction than when you create something with your hands and see the results of that. So I just want to let you know that. In my community, we also have, in Hants East, we also have Gallery 215, which is down towards Selma area, and we have the Chart Society in Maitland who operate the High Tides Center there. They took over an old church building for $1, another one of those great deals. It became a not-for-profit, and I know they do receive minimal government funding. It's only a couple $1,000s here and there to be able to run some programs, but I can't tell you how beneficial it is to the community of Maitland, who's a little bit out of the way, and they have so much to give, and it's really showcased its creative natures there. So I want to really commend that. The new cultural link, I wasn't aware that it was as far into the planning as it is, and I just wanted to ask you, certainly I recognize that we need the small spaces as well. They're very important for those those starting people that aren't ready to move forward yet, but the new culture link, what kind of a role will that play? What kind of a facility will that be to be able to house, and what kind of impact is that going to have on the industry?
That question's directed to Mr. Huston.
Sure. I think I'll actually hand that over to Chris, who's been more closely involved with that project, but it's really going to be, I think, a real flagship space for the province and for the city.
Mr. Shore.
Thank you. So Culture Link is going to be open actually in the fall of this year. That's the plan for it. So the renovations are well underway. This is for those of you that don't know, renovation of the old World Trade and Convention Center. It's a reuse of that part of that building. It's defined as a cultural hub. It means that's the governance structure of the organizations that are in there are mixed use. So we've got a combination of for-profit entities, non-profit entities, and non-profit cultural organizations. It will have a small cinema in there. There'll be a performance space. There'll be a television studio. There'll be dance studios for the dance community. And there'll be office space available for smaller non-profit organizations. in our experience, the Culture Link is kind of an example of a very long advocacy, I would say, on the part of the community. It has its roots in an entity that used to be called the Legacy Center, which was exactly formed. Nonprofit organizations came forward looking for space to perform and to have studio space and all of that. Culture Link itself is related to that, but not exactly an offshoot of Legacy. But it shows that the development of these kinds of spaces often takes a long period of time. But the structure here is that it's a combination of federal, municipal, and provincial funding. It also has a significant private interest. And one of the things that was very key to us was that it's working on a model of sustainability as it moves forward. So all of the work that we did with the proponent was to ensure that they had a model that the Culture Link would be able to operate on its own for a long period of time. The mixed use model of that, the sustainability element, these are all things that are kind of important to us because they're important indicators of what we think is a healthy entity, which is we want to make sure that organizations have everything that they need when you're looking at a project of that size. But we think it will have benefit to across the boards, from smaller nonprofits to the dance community to the music community, because there'll be a music venue there, mixed in with some television and allowing all of those organizations to be in the same space to interact. It's something that Sebastien and I think Emily made reference to earlier. The idea that they're all there in the same space, able to talk to each other, exchange with each other, is one of the big benefits of the project.
Ms. Miller, do you have a supplementary?
I will forego mine in view of the time.
We have a trend here. I had Ms. DiCostanzo, but she stepped out, so let's move over to Mr. Lohr.
Wow, okay, I really appreciate the presentation, and when I think about community art groups, I think that we could have duplicated these three many times over. There's many groups in the province, many small groups, and certainly in my area, and what I hear is the barrier, or a barrier, is sort of the funding process or getting through the hoops. So I guess my question is for the people here from the Communities, Culture, and Heritage, and clearly you have a very broad mandate. There's many things you're funding, but I'm just wondering if you could go through what is the process of the application process, and how do you get through the front door to get that application in, and what sorts of things you're looking for, whichever one of the three of you want to address that, in terms of what would constitute a successful process, or what are you looking for?
Mr. Huston?
Thanks. I'll start and speak at a general level, and then I'll likely hand it over to Chris, who has more specific examples. But just to highlight what you're speaking to is that we do have more than several funding programs. I believe just under 70 separate funding programs that are directed towards arts and culture initiatives or programs. So there's a lot. And certainly, I think, part of the work that we're going to be doing over the next year is we're going to be undertaking a review of not just those programs, but all programs across CCH. To look at, are they the most effective use of dollars? Are they easy for the sector and for community to apply to access? Are they are the folks that typically don't access those funds, are there barriers that we need to remove? So, for example, from African Nova Scotian communities or Indigenous communities, and looking at we have ranges of different programs that folks have alluded to. And the way that we ask folks to provide information for a $5,000 grant to a $100,000 grant is not necessarily the same, and it's not necessarily based on the risk. So we're really looking at that to see if there's some best practices that we can put in place to streamline the process so that we can reduce the administrative burden. Because we're certainly hearing that from a number of organizations that, hey, the funding's great, but it's taking me days or weeks to apply for $5,000. It's not worth it. I'd rather go somewhere else. So we're looking at some of those things, but I'll hand it over to Chris, and he can talk a little bit about, in essence, what we try to do with all the applications.
Mr. Shore.
Thank you. All of the applications come into the department, and as the deputy referred to, there's a number of different, about 67 different programs. Every program has a set of guidelines that are published and available to anybody in the community. They're managed usually by program officers who have certain responsibilities for programs. Every application that comes in is reviewed and basically according to a series of evaluations. There are two main kind of streams. Actually, there are three. One is with Arts Nova Scotia, which is responsible for the professional arts funding in the province. They use a system called a peer assessment committee. So all of the applications, a peer assessment committee is made up of professional artists within a specific discipline looking at applications for that discipline. So for visual arts, for example, we would have 3 professional artists come in and review those applications. And they make the decisions as to, according to a series of of criteria that they're looking at as to what projects should be funded. Similarly, in other parts of the department, we use what's called a panel process. The difference between the two is on a panel process, we have exterior people coming in, but it also means that the program officer, who's a staff person of the department, also has a say in the evaluation of those projects. The third sort of stream is one where we have a program called the Creative Industries Fund, where a program officer actually works long-term with a program proponent. An applicant will come in and have an idea for a project, and they'll work with that program officer for a long period of time, making sure that everything is proper with the application, that it falls under the program criteria, and that is then passed up through the department through a rather robust series of reviews internally before it goes finally to the minister for approval. All of the programs that we have at CCH, though, are very robust in that sense in terms of having evaluation and criteria that are set out well in advance and a rather substantive review process.
Mr. Lord, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. I will take it. No, sorry. I guess what I'm concerned about is maybe what I see as 2 sort of anomalies that we've seen recently in your process. And coming from the Annapolis Valley, we've seen the Bridgetown track, which was a 2/3, 1/3 funded federal provincial, which your department funded, which was reported in all Nova Scotia that one of your staff did the application, and there was a community group that was formed after the application was approved. And so I'm just very concerned about sort of how this all panned out. Normally there's an applicant, there's a rigorous process, but in this case we see Communities, Cultures and Heritage did all the work. There was no third partner, there was no community funding, the municipality did not put any money in. It's apparently over budget. So concerned about that, just wanted if you had any comments on that. I did say there was 2. The other one is the mental health clinic here, in which your minister has stated that he will find funding for. So I guess that's a 2-part question. What happened in Bridgetown, and what's happening with the mental health clinic, and why are you so all over the map in your process?
Mr. Huston?
I'll speak to that. In terms of the concerns around that funding, and I think, where am I over here, sorry. Whether Bridgetown or other funding pieces, certainly it's a serious issue in terms of how funds are allocated, and we went through a review from the Auditor General, I think a couple years back, and in general, pleased to say that the review of that was positive in the sense that funding was going to where it was directed and was following departmental program guidelines. But there were some areas that were identified for areas for improvement, which we have been working diligently on over the past couple of years. In particular, I'll just highlight some of those because I think it speaks to some of the issues or concerns that you're raising. Final report assessments have been implemented for many of the funds and are on track for compliance in the coming fiscal year. We put in place an inspection process for infrastructure projects. It's been developed and implemented. Administrative deficiencies that were identified, such as date stamping and making sure, pretty straightforward things, those have been implemented as well. And of the discretionary grants that the Auditor General identified, we've moved those out of discretionary, only 2 remain, and we've put in place accountability reporting processes that will be phased in over this year to address that piece. I can speak specifically to the North End Clinic piece. We are working with the clinic to identify essentially what happened in that case is that they made 2 applications for funding. One of those pieces was, one of those applications, it was funded. In the other application, the information was not clear, and we've since had conversations with the clinic and the executive director there. And pleased to say that some positive conversations happening, and we're moving to put in place funding that will at least take them over the next few months to look for more long-term sustainable funding. So certainly, again, I think that speaks to some of the things that folks have raised and others is we do have a lot of programs, funding programs, and sometimes what we really try to do is put the organization and the person at the center. And so, but at times, of course, when you have this many programs and processes in place, sometimes that happens, but that's why we are looking to undertake that review, exactly that.
Ms. Di Costanzo.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was really excited to hear about all the presenters today and coming, and I was kind of sad when I heard about the bus stop, and I said, I've never been to it. I've been to the theatres in Dartmouth, I've actually been to Ross Creek, I've done all this, but I haven't, so my apology, and I will figure out why I have not heard about it. I don't know if it's about publicity, but I've really enjoyed going to Dartmouth to the, is it the Little House is called? And where they have a lot of little shows, and a friend of mine who's a lawyer, has an a BSc and an artist at the same time, and she's a wonderful actress. So people have ways to show their creativity in Nova Scotia. My question was, I was also very excited to hear about the 80 million for the art gallery that. It's going to put Halifax on the map. We're going to be a city. Any investment into the arts, to me, it brings tourism. It brings us into a different level when we invest in art. So my question was about the 5.5 million towards the development of the former trade center. If you can give me some more information of what is that going to mean to you guys, to the other arts, and how is it going to develop and help a lot of the issues that you may have. Can those spaces be used for the artists who are not finding space?
So is that best directed to the...
Whoever wants to, but maybe we can start with Justin, if
Mr.
you would
Huston?
like, about the 5.5 million.
So sorry, I think are you referring to the Culture Link project that was...
Well, the former trade center, and what is it going to look like?
Sure. And I think Chris was able to highlight some of the aspects of that project. But certainly I think the key that's important is that it will serve as a hub or a key grounding place for community, the broader community and the interactions that can take place there, and the high level quality space and venues that will be accessible. But I think, if I may, I think I'd rather turn it over to the representative of the arts organizations, because I think they've been talking a lot about the importance of that space and the connection, and I think they probably have something they can offer in that space as well.
Mr. Labelle?
Sure, I can speak to that maybe because it's more geared towards a performance piece of infrastructure. I'm not sure how it might serve the visual arts sector, but truthfully, I'm also not sure how it will serve the theater community either. I mean, there hasn't been much dialogue between the Culture Link and people in the theater community. There has been as of late, but there's a lot of hope because it's something when there's so little, but there is a lot of fear because of past projects that a large piece of infrastructure will intended to serve so many different purposes will not adequately service specific needs. It's a very large venue, and so there is apprehension around the size. unclarity. I mean, I know that folks involved in the link have talked about subsidized rates and accessibility, and we're all, in my community, eagerly awaiting details around that and how folks in the performing arts community at the smaller budget level will be able to access that space. But also in terms of the scale, when we look at the drawing so far, it looks like very large amphitheater. And so when you're an emerging theater company and you're just starting out and you go to the bus stop where there's 70 seats and you have 60 people in the audience, it feels really great. You've got a full house. If you're going into a theater that has 500 seats and you've got 60 people in the room, it feels pretty deadly. And so there's a lot of apprehension about how well or not it will service the theater community. I know that there's a lot of dance organizations that are involved, and there's a lot of hope there because there's so few spaces for dance and with proper floor for dance. And admittedly, at the bus stop, we are not ideal for dance for that reason. But if you look at the website for the Culture Link and you look at the artist groups that are supportive of the project, there's not a single theater organization that's listed. And that's not to disparage the link or to disparage the investment in the link, but that's just a flag of what are the needs being focused on and what we might expect. And so that's why I'm saying that there's some apprehension from the theater community about how well the link will answer our specific needs in the theater community around use of space and also accessibility. I also want to address, the term community has been used both by us presenters and members of the committee in terms of talking about arts in the community and community arts. And I want to make sure to clarify a distinction between what's called often community arts and professional arts, where especially like in community theater, and the Sawmill House is an example of that, and also the Pond Theater Arts Guild. Those are organizations that present the work of amateur or non-remunerated artists. And so in those cases, often arts organizations don't have the same pressures that we do in the professional arts sector because they have to invest in the infrastructure, but they're not paying artists. And so in our case, we remunerate artists and ensure that we remunerate enough for artists to have a livelihood in addition to administrators and in addition to investing in arts infrastructure. So our pressures are much greater in terms of our operating budgets and how spread thin we are. So I just wanted to clarify the distinction between community arts and professional arts. And often the smaller organizations like us three often create a bridge between what's called community arts and the professional arts, often at entry level for artists that have been creating at no pay for a long time and are looking to build a career as a professional artist that's being remunerated for their work. Often it's through our kinds of spaces that they'll find that breakthrough.
Thank you. I see everybody nodding their head, so I think I can move to the supplementary.
Thank you. No, I was imagining, if they had a large space and a smaller theater as well that can offer some space for the smaller artists. I don't know, but your input, if the space of 500 is too large and they could have a smaller theater within that big complex as well. So it will. You'll have to put your input that this is an important, need, and I'm sure work together. My other question was about the the supplements. For example, I have in Clayton Park West, we have the Bella Rose, and I know Spats Theatre. Are these being used by your groups as well? And is there supplements for you so you can use those theatres? What is happening in that field? You have a theatre that in the community in Clayton Park, and you have a theatre at Spats. Are these being used by your groups as well?
Sounds like a question for Mr. Labelle.
Yeah.
Generally little. There are some instances where groups who perform at the Bus Stop Theatre and other smaller venues will also occasionally perform at the Bella Rose Centre or the Spats, but oftentimes those spaces are not affordable for smaller arts groups, and I'm not actually very familiar with the Belle Rose, but the Spats is a very large amphitheater. It's also a proscenium theater. It's not a black box, and so in terms of its functionality, it's not as adaptable as the bus stop theater. It's kind of the same case where, if you're performing for an anticipated audience of 60 to 100 people, if you're going to the Spats, it's a huge auditorium. You as a performer myself, performing to an empty room or what feels like an empty room is pretty awful. And it has an impact on the show. It has an impact on the audience experience as well. The programming at the Spats is often touring shows, larger shows that are touring nationally and will make a stop in Halifax at the Spats. Larger scale shows, often musicals or large concerts, things that will draw big audiences. So it's not the same kind of demographic in terms of both. In terms of artists that are seen at the Spats as the bus stop theater. There's a little bit of overlap, but by and large, the services and functions that they serve in the arts ecosystem is not the same.
Thank you, Mr. Labelle. Just a little time check. We're about halfway through our time. We've got through 4 members' questions. I've got 4 on the list, so after those 4, it's if time permitted. So I'll go to Ms. Adams.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all of the organizations who presented. You represent all of the amazing nonprofit organizations who are doing the majority of all of the work. And I know in my community of Co-Harbor Eastern Passage, we're very fortunate that we have a Lions Club, a Buffalo Club, and a Legion, because a lot of our musicians and our theater group, if those places disappear, there's nowhere for them to go. And so it does start with the space. And so I echo the other questions that talk about the small art space. I was a little disturbed when the Deputy Minister mentioned about the comment from Mr. Lohr about the funding for the mental health clinic, that they were looking at some sort of urgent funding for a few months for that facility. So it goes to my question about the sustainability of the funding, because 2 of the 3 groups mentioned, one-time grants are A, exhausting, and B, I'm not using your word, but the anxiety of the sustainable future is always there. So I wanted to go to Mr. Huston's comment about the fact that there was an increase in funding commitment from $62 million in 2015 to $94 million in 2019, because that doesn't marry with the summary of all of these places being closed down. And so you mentioned in your presentation that 72% of the CCH budget goes directly into the community. So that, I'm assuming, means that 28% goes towards administrative costs, if I'm correct. If not, you can let me know. So my question is, if we had added $32 million more over 5 years, how many more organizations or nonprofits and artistic cultural groups are you providing grants for? Or has that extra $32 million been sucked away by the administrative costs? Because when you said that there were 67 different programs with different guidelines for applying for grants, having gone through that grant process myself with various groups, it's a nightmare. And I know how long it takes people to just apply for those grants. So I'm wondering if you can comment on how much of that increased $32 million actually is being sucked away by the administration of such a wide variety of grant application processes.
Mr. Huston?
Sure. I'll try to answer that question as clearly as I can. First, let me back up a little bit. So when I talked about the overall budget increasing from 62 to 94 roughly, so that was for the entire Department of Communities, Culture and Heritage. So that includes other funding in the sports and recreation field, accessibility grants, sustainable transportation. We're doing work around before and after programs for schools, for physical literacy and getting kids moving. So The increase in the budget, and I'm sorry if that was misleading, isn't just focused just on the arts and culture organizations. So that's an important piece. And I think to be clear for the committee as well, our operating funding for arts organizations has not increased for several years. And I want to be clear with that. I'm not trying to frame it in a different way. But operating funding is a piece of the funding that I've talked about, and so our project and other program funding has increased. I don't have that number over that time period, but that is something I can come back to, or I can provide to you directly or to the committee if that's requested. I hope I'm able to answer that question clearly.
Ms. Adams, do you want a supplementary here?
Yes, I do. Thanks. So I guess, one of the questions is, how do these organizations function if you've frozen operating supports for 10 years, I believe it is? But the other thing that you mentioned is where I want to go next, is you talked about the fact that with all of these 7D separate funding programs that you were planning on a review of all your communities, culture, and heritage programs. And I know what the Auditor General said about that. But I'm guessing this particular government's been in power for over almost 7 years now. So I'm wondering, because I asked the Minister of Communities, Culture and Heritage this a couple of years ago during budget debate, whether there had been a review of all the programs to see if all of these 70 programs were working efficiently and they were achieving the outcomes that people were looking at. Why are you just now starting a review of these programs, especially given this massive commitment for a new art gallery? And so I know you're planning on reviewing all of these at some time in the future, but my question is, given the fact that this province has committed $130 million with funds from the feds and the municipality for a new art gallery, were there any plans to include spaces within that new art gallery for the small and medium performing arts community at all, or is it just going to be for the larger organizations? Because these guys are talking about a sense of panic and apprehension of what's going to happen to their organizations and their infrastructure. And if there's no space, there's nothing there. So I would like you to supply to us at some future time how much of that 62 to 94 million went to the arts community. I realize you don't have that now, but I would specifically like to know now whether the new art gallery is going to provide any kind of space for the small and medium-sized performing arts establishments.
Mr. Huston.
I can speak to it in general terms. The intention really is for that art gallery to become an iconic space for an art gallery for Halifax and for the province. So there are certainly efforts to make it more accessible and more open and welcoming to all Nova Scotians, but to be clear that the primary focus is going to be an art gallery. So to my knowledge, there aren't plans in terms of specific spaces for small or now, I think just like there are currently in the current gallery, there's a small auditorium, there's some spaces there that are utilized by the broader community. I think that will continue because the real purpose is to try to make it even more accessible and open, similar to the library, an iconic piece that people really can use for more than just coming to view specific pieces of art. But, I mean, to answer your question, I would say no, there isn't a specific focus on creating, as we talked about, this ecosystem space. And if I could just further elaborate on that a little bit, I think the terminology of the ecosystem of space, I think, really is a critical piece, and I think we've heard that from the presenters, and it's certainly what I'm hearing from my staff as well, is that it isn't an either-or. This isn't about just creating the big, shiny places, as someone referenced, but it is about creating those spaces and that pipeline, essentially, for emerging artists or artists that are looking to experiment, as folks eloquently said. So the gallery will be focused on being a provincial gallery in an iconic space, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to focus on those small and medium spaces as well.
Thank you. Ms. LeBlanc.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, thank you, Mr. Huston, for that. I do find your responses very refreshing, to be honest. Like, I think that you're a straight shooter here, and I really appreciate it. And I think it's really important that we understand in this room one other thing about that gallery space and about the larger infrastructure pieces, and that it is not, in my opinion, and I think probably I could be backed up here by other people at the table, but it is not that a large space, a big, expensive, giant piece of infrastructure is for the top things that are happening, right? And that the small spaces are for emerging, new student, emerging artists. There are a number of professional artists, famous professional artists who put Nova Scotia on the map who need small spaces. It is not about it. Listen, I also taught theater at Dalhousie for many, many years, and I watched as those graduates would churn out and see that they had no place to cut their teeth. So that is a very important part of this. But the discussion has to be about how symbiotic the relationships are between different types of art being made, and that includes the symbiosis between performance art and visual art, and the way that those things can intersect and cross-pollinate as well. I think that's a really important part of this discussion. But I also, and I also wanted to comment on something Mr. Labelle said, which is that, in terms of like, as a performer, performing in a large space when there's like 10 people there is super depressing, totally true. But there are lots of, again, I want to make the point that just because a thing draws big audiences or a musical draws in a full house does not mean it's more successful than 80 people coming to see a piece of theater by 2B on its premiere run. 2B's success is in how many people see their shows because they tour to small spaces all over the world. It's not that they're bringing in 500 people at once and they're like trying to be Peter Pan or whatever. So I just want to make that comment. But I want to talk about operating funding, actually, in my question. So we've heard already that there's been a 10-year freeze on operating organizations. I will quickly say that it was on the grounds of the Ross Creek Centre for the Arts, where my theatre company got a letter from the Canada Council saying we had just received operating funding for the first time. And literally my colleagues did cartwheels across the field because it meant a life change for us. It meant that one of us would be an employee, and that happened to be me, which meant that when I got pregnant, I was able to take a paid parental leave. Like, it's truly life-changing operating funding for artists. And so I want to ask the artists in the room, if you could imagine for a moment, if you had the actual amount of operating funding that you needed for your organization, what would be happening in your organization? What would it look like for the artists that are working there? What would it look like? And what would it look like to the arts sector?
Who would like to begin? Ms. Wolchyn-Raab.
First and foremost, we would hire a second staff position. We have been planning and trying to get that happening for a long time. And the effect that would have on our organization, on the community at large, is that we have been hearing from our community that there is no place to be an emerging arts administrator in Halifax, too, that you have to come already with a wealth of experience. And so to be able to create a position that was aimed at mentorship and aimed at legacy building within our already fairly long-standing organization would be an amazing shift for the organization and also for the community. It would give us a chance to hire somebody who was maybe a year or two out of school and interested in curating. To hire them on a full-time permanent basis would be quite an amazing thing, and would help us leverage a lot of really exciting careers. And I think for our artists, we would be able to support more projects, which is something that we very much want to do. We started studio spaces this year, which permanent studio spaces is something in Halifax that has been also rapidly declining, and artists are losing their studios left, right, and center. So we started 4 artist studios. It's not enough by any stretch. We'd like to start more, and we'd like to be able to offer them more affordably as well. Right now, we're charging rent that's a way of making up these losses that happen. And when operating funding is frozen, I also want to point out that it's in effect getting a small decrease every year, because your landlord doesn't care that your operating grant has been frozen. They're still going to raise the rent on you. The cell phone company doesn't care. They're still going to raise the rent on you. And so what that does is over time, it causes us to either stall salaries, which is a very real thing, or it causes us to reduce our programming or reduce our staff. And I've seen organizations of artisan centers of all kinds take all of those measures when that happens.
Anyone else like to comment, Mr. Labelle?
Yeah, I mean, when I heard the question, for a moment I thought, it's almost hard to imagine. I was like, what would we do if we actually had proper funding? I mean, we would actually be able to operate and do what we want to do properly and without being under constant financial duress. And, in my package, I've included excerpts from a recent labor market information study of the cultural labor force in Canada that was commissioned by the Conference Board of Canada. And in it, you find statistics that reveal that while, cultural workers tend to be younger on average and have higher levels of education attainment than the general workforce, we're among the lowest in terms of income earners in the broader market labor market force across Canada, and that income is even significantly less when you consider the number of unpaid hours that paid staff do in arts organizations. And the limitations that there are on hiring new staff and the overburden that falls on existing staff and managerial staff to take on so much work and stretch ourselves so thin. And so, what could we do? I mean, we could retain staff for longer. We could actually properly compensate people, offer benefits, offer a proper livelihood that's expected in any other economic sector, except in ours, where there's always the stigma of, well, you're doing it for fun. So you don't really deserve the same pay or the same working conditions as people in other economic sectors. And so we could get out of that cycle and actually have artists that are thriving, that have healthy livelihoods and working conditions, and not constantly working under duress and burning out. And we can, all, as organizations, properly deliver the services that we want to deliver with healthy staff and proper staffing, enough staffing. And so, I could just in my mind think, what if we had, because at the Bus Stop Theatre, we don't have operating funding. We don't. That's and that's when when we talk about operating the freeze and operating funds, it's not just the existing organizations that have access to operating funds and it's been frozen and depreciating in value over the years, but anybody else trying to enter cannot have access. The Bus Stop Theatre has been operating for 17 years. We're one of the most successful performing arts venues in Nova Scotia. We do not get operating funding. And when we ask the program officers if we can apply, we are discouraged from applying because we are told, don't waste your precious time and resources, the so few that you have, in applying for a grant that you will not get because there is no money available. That's a real problem.
So I want to point out that the Turret Art Space is actually already a response to the lack of operating funding. So we're talking about the need to have the people that we will be renting to, all the people who are going to be filling up these dynamic spaces from different arts organizations, all of those organizations are suffering a lack of operating funds. So if those organizations were healthier, not only and we keep the rent low because, oh heavens forbid, we have operating funding too, then all of that wiggle room is going back to artists, right? So the Turret Art Space is a bit of a different arts organization because it is about being a space. It's about having the space and having those other arts organizations find a home with us. So when I think about what a thriving Turret Art Space looks like, it's all kinds of dynamic activities, cross-pollinating from these various organizations, different organizations that don't rent in our building, coming in to do special events. I imagine a highlight of our year being the Nocturne Festival and other forms of festival-type engagement. So I really think that it can be a beautiful and dynamic space. And I just wanted to kind of drive home that the model that we've chosen that balances the commercial tenants with the not-for-profit tenants to keep those rents low is already a response to the climate and to the lack of resources available. So what we could do if we had plentiful resources would just skyrocket our vision up to the next level.
Ms. Labelle, supplementary.
Thank you. Thanks for those responses. And I just wanted to then direct my supplementary to the department, and it's kind of a two-parter. One is if you could address what Mr. Labelle has said about this issue of companies not being able to get in on the operating program and being discouraged to apply. So when you're looking, I remember there was a case to be made when applying for grants to apply for the maximum amount that you actually need, so that the department sees what the true costs are. And so I wonder if you're taking into account those who are being discouraged from applying when you're looking at actually what your budgetary requests are when you go to the Treasury Board. So that's A. But also B, if you could just talk a little bit about the review of the funding and when the program review will be completed.
Mr. Huston.
Okay, thank you. Certainly, let me, I just want to also just sort of respond a little bit too, because certainly the operating pressure piece, it's not something that we take lightly. I've certainly met with a number of organizations over the past 6 months, executive directors of organizations, and certainly we've heard very similar things in terms of pressures coming. And I must say, just a plug, I've only been here 6 months, but I have to say, working with these organizations, some of the strongest leadership and innovation that I've seen across any industry sector. And I know they could always do more with more, but I'm continually impressed by the ability to continue to move forward a vision and to support the community, professional, artistic community. Operational funding, of course, is one piece of it. It's the backbone for a lot of organizations, but we also have a series of other funding which we can talk about, but I know it's not the same. In terms of the, I can't speak specifically to your first question, but I'll probably hand that over to Chris. But I can speak to your second one in a little bit in terms of the time frame around that review. So we're really getting underway with that now. And so I anticipate by the fall, but I can certainly provide that we'll have that review complete. We're going to be working to do some internal analysis in terms of what we're doing already, but then certainly connecting with sectors and leaders in the arts community around how we can improve things. So working with those key stakeholders. I anticipate the fall, and if there's any change in that, I can get back to the committee or talk to you. And maybe I can hand over to Chris in terms of specific around some of the grant funding.
Mr. Shore.
So in terms of operating, obviously we recognize that there are challenges there. And one of the things about operating grant programs is, as previously mentioned, we had 153 organizations in the department that applied to us for that. I think one of the strategies that we've looked at in recent years is, in terms of operating support, what people are looking for is a kind of predictable, sustainable amount of money that they can depend on. But at the same time, what you're trying to do with a program like that is you're also trying to help organizations and kind of incentivize them to take some, to innovate and take some risks where they can. And so what the focus in recent years has been on project support that kind of allows people to do that. So so I made reference earlier to something called the Creative Industries Fund, which is, and I think Emily made reference earlier to the One-Time Emerging Program. So One-Time Emerging Program is structured so that arts and cultural organizations can come in and apply for help in terms of strategic planning or development planning or governance planning. So this is in and around helping organizations to develop strategies that strengthen them in the long term. The Creative Industries Fund is designed specifically to identify additional revenue streams for organizations. So specifically in that case, in terms of increasing sales and exportability, and to develop new markets. So we've seen not-for-profit organizations come into the Creative Industries Fund, lots of theater companies that have come into that program, especially in and around developing new markets for tours, getting people in to help them to export, building capacity for when they're going into new markets. And examples of that, like we've had funding to be theater and to Heist Theater. These names will be familiar to you guys, maybe not to the whole committee. But so really, I think the thinking has been, how do we help organizations identify new revenue streams? And that's kind of where the focus has been with the project funding, to kind of support that.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Roberts.
Thank you. I'm lucky to have Bus Stop in my constituency, and I have seen the most incredible range of performances in that space. And certainly to kind of echo Ms. LeBlanc's comment earlier, I have seen incredible work by very established artists in that space. But I particularly think of watching, I think it may have been the debut performance of To Be Theater's One Discordant Violin, which has since toured the world. And it was an incredibly special theater experience. And I think it certainly could have been in a venue that was twice as big, but it wouldn't have fit in many other spaces in Halifax. And when I think about where people go from the bus stop, the next space that would kind of make sense is the smaller stage at Neptune, where some shows end up working and fitting. But it's an incredible, fertile and dynamic space. And I would add in there, some of the very community grounded spaces where I've seen community organizations using theater to talk about the issues that they're working on. In the case, for example, of Stepping Stone, which did theater where, the performers on stage were sex workers. Just incredible stuff. So none of that is to ask my question, which is, we often hear that we have to choose between arts funding, or that arts funding is seen as a luxury somehow. And we know that we have, needs that are not luxuries in Nova Scotia, like healthcare and roads, always roads. Would anyone on the committee want to just respond to that narrative and that framing? Like, how, do we have to change the frame that we put on funding for the arts?
Ms. Wolchyn-Raab.
Yeah. I will say that I think there's always the proverbial pothole. So I think that it is really easy to think about arts funding as at the bottom of your list of needs. But I would say that for smaller arts organizations in particular, in a lot of ways, and particularly as we grow our understanding of engaging with marginalized communities and working with marginalized communities, we take on the mantle of being frontline workers very much so. Eyelevel works with In My Own Voice. Eyelevel works with St. George's YouthNet. So these are organizations that are providing very essential services to the community. They're doing anti-violence work. They're providing affordable childcare, and they're coming to us to work with them so that we can kind of enrich their programming. So I would say that when you reduce arts funding in favor of other maybe more essential services, I think it does a disservice, because these are services that are working harmoniously together.
Anyone else? We've got a couple minutes here. Anyone else? Mr. Labelle?
Yeah, I think it's a false notion when we present, where we assume that there are pressing needs that supersede a need to invest in the arts and culture sector, I think it's a very well-known fact, a very researched, that a vibrant artistic community generates population growth and economic growth in a region. It's also recognized by the province's own Building Vibrant Communities program, which I mentioned earlier, that arts and culture programs help alleviate poverty in a community and also help alleviate pressures on health and social programs because they ameliorate the social determinants of health in a community. In addition to providing opportunities for employment if there's proper operating support. And we know that investment in the arts is a preventative measure also in assisting people who are affected by poverty or poor health, and that investing in preventative programs and measures is often much more effective and cost-effective than investing in prescriptive programs that have to remedy situations once they're already present.
Thank you. That really concludes our time, and I wanted to give our witnesses an opportunity to make some quick final comments. If we can get through the group of you in 6 minutes or so, we can wrap up our discussions here. Who would like to begin? Should we just, Mr. Huston?
Sure, we can go right down the line. So I just have a few closing statements here. As I think we've heard today, I think everyone here around the table, if they didn't already, has really come to understand the value and importance of arts organizations in our province and the role that the art and culture sector plays in making Nova Scotia the best place to live and for people to come here. We also recognize the importance of appropriate funding and supports for these important organizations and the work that they do. As we've mentioned, I think the key is in terms of really working and talking to the sector and really understanding what those pressures are, and we'll continue to try to be as flexible and responsive as possible to organizations and artists to ensure we can advance those projects that have merit and benefit not just the sector but communities broadly. We know that we've, I think, done some good work, and I think we've heard some of that, but we're certainly not resting on our laurels, and we've heard some areas where we can continue to improve. And again, I'll reference the program review or improvement process that we're embarked on and we're working on, and the way that we can enhance the effectiveness, the accessibility of those programs, and the transparency of those programs. So I'll also just leave with you, I think we've heard some really great comments around the value of the culture sector, and I'm sure some of you around this table have heard this, and we can get copies for folks, and I'll leave this for some. But talking around some work that we've done here provincially around the value of the culture sector to the economy, close to $1 billion and 13,000 jobs, really is the backbone to a lot of communities across the province, as well as survey of Nova Scotians about the value of culture that they find. So some really interesting information there that I'll make sure is available to all the committee members.
Thank you. From our three external organizations, would you each like to say a couple words? Ms. Davidson?
This one will work. So in closing, I just wanted to return to the broad concept of accessibility and talk about how that's such a key feature of the work that we are doing at the Turret Art Space in building a renovated Khyber building. So we're thinking about financial accessibility, making sure that the space that we're building and providing meets the needs of the community who are often in a tight pinch. And so that those organizations can pass on free and low-cost programming to the community. Physical accessibility, making sure that this beautiful heritage building can actually be accessible to people with a range of mobility needs, making it wheelchair accessible. And then cultural accessibility. How can we transform the art spaces that we know and love to be spaces that are really welcoming to people from all walks of life, that support art by Indigenous artists, that help African Nova Scotian artists take their space in the spotlight? So I really think that all of that good hope and good energy about creating accessibility needs to be supported by the funds to make that possible. Thank you.
Mr. Labelle?
Yeah, I'll just, in closing, kind of respond to Mr. Huston's points about the focus at Communities, Culture and Heritage on grants that examine or that provide export opportunities and for projects and also strategic planning. Of course, you can't export if you have nowhere to start from, is an obvious one. In terms of projects, the growth in project grants has been fantastic, but it's hard when you can't, once your project is done, can't land back on a robust administrative core in your organization to keep going from project to project. And lastly, the strategic planning and looking for other new revenue sources. Of course, when we're talking about revenue sources other than government, then we're looking at the corporate sector and business sector for sponsorships, which can be beneficial, but that often comes with commercial needs and interests, the market interests and advertising interests of your sponsors. And so in terms of the spaces that we operate, which focus a lot on research and exploration in the arts, same as in science, in the arts sector, research and exploration can flourish much further when there's a lower reliance on commercial needs and interest.
And finally, Ms. Wolchyn-Raab.
So I also wanted to touch back again on the concept of accessibility and availability and the work that organizations like Eyelevel are doing in facilitating dialogues around anti-racism work, around activism work, and creating spaces where anti-oppression work is actively happening and spreading out through the community, because I think that's very important. And I want to acknowledge not just Eyelevel, but our fellow artist-run centers who have been really leading this charge. And I think in terms of space, it has been interesting to me in the past little while that we're even, by being in close proximity to bus stop, are starting to see a little bit of I guess, rebounds, or the folks who can't find space at bus stop are even coming to me in my small office space and my small bookstore and asking if they can workshop a performance publicly in that space. So I think that we're artists and we're creative and we want to find solutions to the problems that we're facing. And while sometimes those creative solutions do breed further creativity, it would be nice if we weren't always scrapping it together all of the time.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I do want to thank our witnesses, particularly from the arts community. They're really highlighting some of the challenges that the arts community faces, and I think all of my colleagues learned a little bit about the importance of the whole ecosystem of the arts, the importance of small spaces and not just large spaces. And I really think there's perhaps more dialogue with the LINK project that we might want to encourage. The issues of accessibility and the role that arts can play in that, I think was a new angle that came to me, as well as I do want to thank Ms. Davidson as an architect. Thank you for protecting that building. And just one final comment to Ms. Roberts' question around funding for the arts in our system, where health and education and affordable housing and all the different needs that we have. This is not a new issue. I grew up in an arts community, or an arts family, and my father spent 3 years as the maritime representative for the Canadian Council of the Arts in the 70s. And he could identify with these gentlemen on the left that they talked to hundreds of arts communities and just wish they had more money for all the great and creative ideas that the people on our right here are bringing forward. So it's really, I do want to thank both of you on both sides of that tussle of finding funding, because I think we're all working together to try and enhance the arts in our province. I think we all see the value of it. And it's by working together that we can continue to make that blossom and show off the best of the heritage and culture of Nova Scotians. So with that, I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much. Go to retirement. You're